So, 1,000 years ago, a Muslim text promoted a social form of asceticism in which the ascetic renounces desires for material things but remains in the company of people. This text, known as Rasa'il Ikhwan al-Safa, or the Epistles of the Brethren of Purity, promoted the pursuit of knowledge and tolerance for people of other religions and cultures. In fact, the text goes beyond tolerance and asserts that if we as humans want to understand ourselves and the world, then we need to live together. We need to reach out and learn from the wisdom of other religions and cultures. We all need to come together and actively work together to construct knowledge and pursue understanding. The text stresses personal responsibility. Every individual needs to be cognizant of the state of his or her soul and to work on purifying it in order to achieve happiness. Ostensibly, however, the text is not a political or sociological text. For decades, it has been classified as an encyclopedia because it is divided into 51 or 52 epistles, depending on how you count them. Nowhere does the text mention the violence that was taking place as the authors wrote. Nowhere does it mention the divisions between the Muslims at the time. Another author who was writing in the 10th century wrote that there were 73 Muslim sects at the time. But Ikhwan al-Safa didn't even name their own affiliation, let alone the schisms in Basra and Baghdad, where they were writing. And yet, throughout their encyclopedic Arabic work, Ikhwan al-Safa inserted stories. One after another, the stories promoted their aesthetic outlook, while at the same time emphasizing the human need for company. In these stories, they showed that we need each other not only to be happy in this world, but to achieve salvation in the next. Our souls are lost and sick without friends who advise us when we are wrong and teach us what they know. Even the king needs friends. Ikhwan al-Safa tell 3 stories about kings who are misguided. In each case, the vizier, the king's close advisor, finds a way to speak to the king and help him. I'll share one story for us to discuss together. This is a story within a story. In this story, the king has false beliefs and makes a fool of himself. The vizier, who cares deeply about the king, seeks counsel from a wise friend who tells him, "Be a gentle physician. Do not put the medication except where the illness is. Seek an opportunity to speak. If you see a place for this discussion, then take the opportunity. If you do not, then do not lose your prudence. Know that kings have periods of drunkenness and ignorance of all kinds. Some are the drunkenness caused by power, authority, love for the position of leadership, might, pride, arrogance, and haughtiness. Some of it is the drunkenness of youth, energy, intrepidity, boasting, conceit, courage, cleverness, the desire to win and rule and have a reputation. Some of it is the love for the desires that are centered in the natural disposition and overcoming them, and the leaning towards the usual pleasures, luxuries, comfort, surveil flattery, and the continuance of the habits one is accustomed to since youth. Some are the ignorances that pile up from the beginning, and the characters that develop with natural disposition and innate character. All of these are types of drunkenness that prevent one from listening to wisdom and considering repercussions and contemplation and deliberation on the return and the hereafter. The vizier accepts his friend's advice and waits for an opportunity to talk to the king. The opportunity comes up when the king suggests to the vizier that the two walk around the city in disguise. The king and the vizier come to a mountain of trash, where animal corpses are piled up and it smells terrible. Behind it, they see an ugly man and an ugly woman singing and dancing and flirting with each other. The ugly man tells the ugly woman that she is the most beautiful woman in the world. And she tells him that he is the most beautiful man in the world. And she tells him that he is the king of men. And he tells her that she's the queen of women. As the king watches this couple, he is astonished and comments to the vizier that he had never experienced such happiness in his life. Even though he lives in the most luxurious palace in the world. We're too busy, he said to the vizier, to amuse ourselves like this. We have to deal with protests and riots and uprisings. We have to check the calculations of the accountant. We have to hire people. We have to write letters of condolence and congratulation. We have to respond to letter after letter and learn the news that comes to us. All of this gives us anxiety and sorrow. The king thought about the ugly couple behind the mountain of trash and commented, if they would come to the palace and spend just 1 hour there and experience the luxury that we have, they would never be happy again. They would never be able to tolerate life behind a mountain of trash. The king's vizier remembered his friend's advice and took the opportunity to talk to the king honestly. He told him that there are people who have a greater life than the life of the palace. The king was surprised. He had never heard of a kingdom more mighty or wealthy than his. So he asked the vizier, is there a kingdom that is greater than our kingdom? And the vizier said, no. So the king asked the vizier, then who are the people that we seem contemptible next to? And the vizier responded, the ascetics. And with this response, the king begins his journey of inquiry, asking the vizier questions and listening to the vizier's answers. And the vizier begins from the beginning, teaching the king science, religion, and philosophy. This is how the story ends. If the king accepts his vizier's teaching, then presumably he will abdicate his power in order to seek happiness over wealth and might. And there is another king that Ikhwan al-Safa tell us about who actually does this. He gives up his kingdom and the vizier joins him in his journey. So why do Ikhwan al-Safa tell this story? The story you just heard comes from the Epistle on Missionary Activity. In this epistle, Ikhwan al-Safa outline how one can share wisdom with a king. This story serves as an example, and it's in fact nestled within another story about a wise man who advises a prince. And actually that prince happens to be the Buddha from the Indian story that was originally written in Sanskrit. We don't have time to look at the other stories about kings and their advisors together, but the three stories have in common the idea that renouncing material success is the path to happiness and salvation. But this renunciation does not also mean separating oneself from society or the company of other people. The happy ascetic, for Ikhwan al-Safa, is an ascetic who is not alone. He is one who chooses happiness over wealth or success at the same time as he pursues knowledge and wisdom from different religions and cultures of the world. As I read the 43 stories that appear in this encyclopedic Arabic work, the Epistles of the Brethren of Purity, I saw messages for peace building repeating throughout. I see Ikhwan al-Safa advocating for the renunciation of materialism and calling for tolerance, personal responsibility, and education. But they don't mention the strife and wars around them. They don't mention peace or even justice in their epistles. Are they actually sneaking a model for peace building into their ostensibly scientific and philosophical work? It does seem to me that they are, in fact, making a bold political statement in their epistles. But this statement is not one that they can make publicly or even visibly at the time. It was not popular, it might have even been unthinkable, for Muslim thinkers to say one's religion or sect doesn't ultimately matter for one's salvation. What matters is one's humility, pursuit of wisdom, tolerance, and detachment from the temptations of power, wealth, and success. I think the evidence is in the stories,